Welcome to the Kansas City SQL Server User Group July Lunch and Learn. We have Gonzalo Bissio with us today, going to present Analytics in Azure SQL Managed Instance. What are my options? For our live audience, we will be having a Q&A throughout the presentation. Just a note, this session is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next few days. Since this is a Lunch and Learn, we go ahead and jump right into the presentation. And with that, I will let you take it away, Gonzalo.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina. And thank you very much for having me here. Let me know just if you're seeing my screen right now.
I am seeing your screen, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I know that we have QA at the end of the session, but if you want to do any question, just feel free to ask me whenever you want. I will be checking the chat window, so just feel free and ask the question that you need. I will introduce myself. I am Gonzalo Bissio from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I am working as a data director today in a company called Precision IT. Today, yes, we're going to talk about Azure SQL Managed Instance, my favorite service. We're going to see what are the options that we have today using Azure SQL MI as a data source. Today, everything is data, there is data everywhere, but now the companies want to use the data. So the main point or the thing is, hey, what can I do if I am using Azure SQL MI as a source? What are my options to export data, for example, and see the value of the data, or if I need to transform the data? Okay, what are my options? I will start with a little introduction about Azure SQL MI. We'll talk about the latest updates because I love to tell people what are the things that are changing today. So let's start. Azure SQL MI, it's one of the latest data services in Azure. It come back more or less in 2018. I remember that my first deploy in Azure SQL MI took 40 hours more or less. I will talk about one of the announcements that today takes more or less 30 minutes to complete. It's a service that it is being updated all the time. We're going to hear the latest updates in the latest Microsoft event in the build. So let's start with the Azure SQL families. What are the options? You have SQL Server in virtual machines. You have Azure SQL MI, and then you have Azure SQL Database. If you're using today, for example, SQL Server. What are the differences? Well, the thing is you have an Azure virtual machine, which is, that's it, a virtual machine. Then you have Azure SQL MI in case that you want to use platform as a services. If you don't want to take care of the, for example, OS updates or the antivirus or all that stuff inside the machine. What are the options? Well, Azure SQL Managed Instance and Azure SQL Database. In case that you want to choose Azure SQL Managed Instance, the good thing is that it's almost 100% compatible with VMs, or if you're using servers today, or virtualized servers or physical servers in on-premises. There are some limitations like CLRs, or for example, if you are using file stream or file tables, there are some limitations. If you need, I can share the link with the information with all of the things that are not supported, but today it's almost 100% supported. And then you have Azure SQL Database. This one is one of the first services built in Azure back in 2010, more or less, in February. The good thing for Azure SQL Database is if you're using, for example, a new application or a cloud native application where you are just start building the application, Azure SQL Database is a great start. Unless you are using, for example, jobs or cross database queries, you need to use different stuff if you want to use Azure SQL Database. But it's a good service though. Then why I am talking about service tier, because my first demo talks about business critical and the ability to have a secondary instance within your service. It's free and you can use it as a secondary node, like in availability group, to offload your reads. But then we have general purpose, which is the default one, which is, in fact, there is a new feature there, which allows you to control how many IOPS your servers will have, but we are going to talk this later. The thing is you have two options, general purpose, business critical. By default in general purpose, oops, I don't know if somebody speaks, okay. General purpose used to have, for example, remote blob storage for your database files, but now there is an improvement, a project called Harmens project, which is that now general purpose is used managed disk in order to save the files. So that is a limitation that we used to have performance impact, but right now with the new generation for general purpose, well, it is being used by these managed disks. Or you can choose business critical, better performance, internal high availability. I mean, every time that you build a business critical service, behind bars by default, an availability group with 4 nodes is being built. So, I mean, you have better performance, you have more availability, obviously it's more expensive. About the size, well, general purpose is 16 terabytes in GA, but in business critical it is in public preview. In case that you have, for example, a 10 terabyte database, just be careful because of this size limit. Connectivity, well, we have something called VNets, which is, I mean, every time that you create an Azure SQL MI service, by default, is being built within a VNet, meaning that accessing from the internet is closed. So basically, that, I mean, from the security teams, it's a great news because by default you will have to open the connection to Azure SQL MI. How? Well, you can use, for example, VNet peering, which is open the connection between 2 different VNets, or use the public endpoint. Today, I'm going to show you how to enable the public endpoint. And then obviously we have what is called private endpoint, which means that, for example, I'm going to show you that how to accomplish that private endpoint connectivity in Fabric using private endpoint means that you are connecting 2 different servers, 2 different services using the Azure backbone. So basically you are doing this connection internal, not external, not through internet. So let's go to the latest updates. I'm trying to do as quick as possible because I mean I want to show you as much things as I can. I love demos. So GA for November 20 something. Well, this come back in 2023. Some new features, as I mentioned, the faster provisioning in 30 minutes. Before it took more or less between 3 to 6 hours, depending the size of the Azure SQL MI. It took, I remember that for me it took 4 to 5 hours to complete the build. So now it's just 30 minutes. Just make sure that you enable this feature wave every time that you build an Azure SQL MI. When you choose, for example, the VNet, you will see if your VNet is ready or not to use this new feature. Another one, well, starting and stopping the instance. Be careful only for general purpose. It's an amazing way to save cost. For example, you are using dev or test instances and you want to shut down them, for example, on Friday, or for example, you want to use this from 9 to 6 and then you want to shut it down because of you want to save cost. So remember, this is enabled for GP, not for business critical, but it's an amazing feature though. Then this one is pretty new. I mean, one of the good things if you are migrating to Azure SQL MI, and let's say that you have a service or an application and you need minimum downtime when you perform the migration, you can use distributed availability group to connect your SQL Server 2022 and your Azure SQL MI, but this can be directional. So let's say that you are performing the migration. You migrate to Azure SQL MI, but for some reason you want to roll back because you don't feel, I don't know, comfortable with this, because Azure SQL MI is not what you were expecting, because you have, I don't know, any issue there and you want to roll back, well, you can fail back to SQL 2022. I mean, if you're using SQL 2016, 2017, 2019, you can use this. The thing is, oh, sorry, let me mute. Okay. So if you are moving, you can just roll back from Azure SQL MI, and that's it. If you're using older version, you can just fail over, and that's it. You can connect your on-premises instance, or let's say that you are using a VM in a cloud provider, AWS, GCP, or Azure, and you are connecting this to managed instance, and you're using an older version, you can just fail over, and that's it. But remember about the failback is only for SQL 2022. There is a new enhancement that I will show you later, but I will wait for this. Again, invoking REST API, let's say that you're using, for example, OpenAI and you want to invoke a REST API call. Today it's in private preview. You can just see the QR code there. You can sign for this private preview in case that you want to. I mean, this one is in GA in Azure SQL Database, but in Azure SQL MI is in private preview. So in case that you want to call REST API applications or services, you can just sign up here and call directly from Azure SQL MI. Database Watcher is a new monitoring service, which I don't know if you use in the past Azure Monitor. There was something similar in the past in order to monitor Azure SQL MI, VMs, and those kind of things. Honestly, it was in public preview a bunch of times, but now it was deprecated. So now it's the Database Watcher. It's something similar, which there is an agent monitoring your VMs or Azure SQL MIs or Azure SQL databases, taking metrics using log analytics in order to store that information and use different, for example, different dashboards to show real-time information. In case that you are interested in using this kind of services, these are different options. Update policy for Azure SQL MI, it's a new enhancement, which means I can show you in the portal in a few. I mean, there will be two ways now. You can choose to stay Azure SQL MI in SQL 2022. All the latest cumulative updates will be there. But let's say that, for example, the REST API goes live and you want to use the latest features. What is the thing? So in case that you want to use these latest features, you will have to migrate your existing Azure SQL MI to use the latest Azure SQL MI version. For example, if you are using, as I mentioned before, distributed availability group to synchronize your on-premises or your VM to Azure SQL MI and you want to stay in SQL 2022, you can use the older version. What is the default? SQL Server 2022. But if you want to use the latest versions and the latest features which are being tested in Azure SQL MI, you can use this option. This one is new, came again in the build. That was the only announcement for Azure SQL MI in the build. You have the link there if you want to check it. I will share this to Christina, the slides, so you can check directly this on the blog post. And then the next generation for Azure SQL MI, general purpose, you will see the link there. There are a lot of new options, for example, control the jobs, among other things that you can see, and you can check there. So now let's go to our options. What can I do? So first of all, you have different options. Again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, let's say that you are using business critical and you need to offload your reads. Let's say that you have multiple applications pointing to the Azure SQL MI. You are seeing that the reports are taking a lot and are blocking your tables, and you want to offload the reads. What are the options? Well, the first one, if you're using business critical, is to use the secondary, which is free. You don't need to pay anything, but you can use this secondary instance to offload your reads. As you may know, for example, Query Store will not work there. You can, I mean, on the secondary instance, there are some temporary statistics in order to run your queries, but in case that you want more control, you will have to create the new statistics on the primary, so those statistics replicates to the secondary, so be careful with that. But that is an option. The same amount of resources, between quotes for free, because you don't need to pay anything extra, you don't need to enable anything, but at least you have the option. As you may know, every time that you have an availability group and you execute read operations on the secondary, that can impact the availability group synchronization, so be careful with that. But at least you can use that. Then, well, you can copy, let's say that you have a database on the primary and you need a snapshot, let's say once a day, and you want to copy this database from one part to another one. Yes, I will send you the slides and you can get the link there. Or you can copy the database from one side to another one. Obviously, you will have to modify the connection string because it's a different Azure SQL MI, but in case that you want to copy between quotes natively and you don't want to execute manually the restores, you can use this option. As I mentioned, Azure SQL MI link, in case that you are using on premises or a VM and you want to, let's say, replicate your database to the cloud and then do the operation that you need, well, you can use Azure SQL MI link. Why I put, I'm so sorry, why I put a Microsoft Fabric slide here, because I choose Microsoft Fabric as a destination for my data. Let's say that you're using Azure SQL MI and you need to move the data somewhere, and you choose Fabric as your target. You use Fabric as your service to extract, load, and transform, load data. And I put Fabric here as a destination. Why? Because it's what Microsoft is going right now. What is Microsoft Fabric? Well, it's a new service. It is using the exact same GUI, I would say, from Power BI. It's the exact same thing. In fact, when you connect to Power BI.microsoft.com, automatically it points to fabric.microsoft.com. This is the future in terms of data for Microsoft. You have different experiences in case that you are a data engineer, a data scientist, data analyst, I would say. You can use your experience. You can still use Power BI. In case that you have Power BI Premium, you can use that license for Fabric. There are honestly a bunch of things being updated in Fabric every single month. For example, governance as well, in case that, let's say that you have your data there, you have your different objects, and you want to govern your data, you want to create a new catalog. Well, everything is automatic. I will not talk a lot about Fabric, honestly, but I want to at least give you a few introduction about Fabric. Well, Fabric is everywhere. If you click Microsoft Fabric, OpenAI as well. But that is why I wanted to at least give you a small introduction. I will show you, for example, in a few Fabric, how to, for example, export data from Azure SQL MI to Fabric, how to, for example, create a pipeline within Fabric, how to connect Azure SQL MI to Fabric, because as I mentioned at the very beginning, Azure SQL MI is being built within a VNet, so you need to do something in order to connect Azure SQL MI to Fabric. If we talk about architectures, I love architecture blueprints. These are different options. Today, Azure SQL MI is at the very beginning. It's at the source. As you can see here, we have databases here. It will be here, Azure SQL MI, or you have different sources. What can you use within Fabric? Pipelines, if you're familiar with Synapse or Azure Data Factory, you know what a pipeline is. And then you have something called shortcuts, meaning that you have the information in a source and you can just read that information using this called shortcut. So basically you will be reading the data, but you are not copying the data, you are just reading. It's like a view. Or for example, sorry, but I need to tell this word, link servers. I know that there are a lot of people who loves link servers. So this will be between quotes, a link server to the source of the information. You are just reading, you are not copying it. Basically, you will be avoiding to create different silos because you are copying data everywhere. Here, you are going just to read information and that's it. And then, well, there are different ways to build architectures. This one is medallion architecture. On the medallion architecture, we have different layers. We have bronze, we have silver, we have gold. You can use the same or the name that you want. At least my customers are using bronze, silver, gold. Different layers of informations. On the bronze, all the raw data is there. Let's say that you have different sources, different type of information, structure, unstructured, semi-structure, and you want to put everything on the first layer. Then you do some transformation. You create, for example, different schemas, different tables. On the silver, you refine some information, you remove some duplicates, you prepare the data, and then you move the final version of the table or the data to the gold layer, meaning that then you can use, for example, Power BI, application services, or for example, data science models. Let's say it's the third part of the architecture. In case that you need to transform, to load, to extract data, normally at least my customers are using this architecture. So let's go and talk. I am using something called standing desk, so I will sit on my chair right now. So let's go to the demos. Basically, what you're going to see right now is how to use the second managed instance, how to create a pipeline within Fabric, how to export data using something called CTAS. I don't know if you're familiar with this feature, which is Polybase. You can use Polybase within Azure SQL MI. And then I will see if I have time to show you how to connect Databricks, for example, or what will be at least my idea on how to connect, for example, your information to Databricks. I normally use Databricks, I normally use Fabric with my customers. Obviously, there are other data platforms in case that you're using Snowflake, for example, or you are using other cloud provider. That is fair. And maybe you are using Azure SQL MI within Azure, but you have your analytics in other cloud provider. Well, you can use Polybase in order to export data. For example, let's say that you want to move from Azure to other cloud provider. Well, you can export the data to an Azure Data Lake or storage account, and then just move it whenever you want. But let's start. I will start with let me see. Okay, so let's start with querying the secondary instance. Let me move. I am using a VM within Azure. This one is my Azure SQL MI. Let me just one sec. Could you? Okay, the link. Let me put this little guy in my third monitor. I will see if there is any question. So in order to connect to Azure SQL MI, if you are not familiar with, basically, let me go one sec to the portal. This one is Fabric. I will show you this in a few. So let me open a new one, portal.azure.com. You need to search for Azure SQL Managed Instances Services, and then you will see mine here. The one that we are going to use today is Kansas City one. The endpoint that I am using is this one. And then my pricing tier is business critical. So basically I have this secondary instance to offload my rates. You have different options. I don't know, for example, I mentioned about VNets. And here, well, let me show you later the public endpoint. This one is my VNet. Here you can choose the different service tiers. Can we move from one to another one? The answer is yes. Can I roll back? The answer is yes. There will not be any problem. But now let's start with our demo. So as I mentioned, I have my hostname, the one that I showed you before. Let me see if my Zoom is working. Yes, here. I am using Microsoft Entra authentication. You can use SQL authentication if you want without any problem. This one is a change within Management Studio, which the encryption is mandatory now, starting, if I am not wrong, with the version 20. The encryption is mandatory, so be careful with this because if you don't have the certificate, among other things, the connection might fail. But that's it. You click connect. That's it. On this VM, I built this VM on the same VNet as Azure SQL MI, so I didn't have to open anything in terms of VNet's connectivity. But this one is my primary. As you can see, the agent is up. And you will see that, for example, Query Store is enabled by default in Azure SQL MI. In Azure SQL Database, you will see that, it's here. But now let's connect to the secondary. So what do I need to use? If you're familiar with availability group, you will know these attributes on the connection. We have application intent read-only, and we have the database name. If you're using, for example, availability group and you enable the read feature, you will have to use this pointing to the listener in order to connect to the secondary. You need to create the tables and all that stuff in order to enable the feature. But here, everything is automatically. So if I click connect, you will see, for example, now that the agent is not up. And you will see that this one is my database. And you will see that query store is in read-only, meaning that it's in read-only. I mean, there is an open item for SQL Server to enable query store on secondary replicas. I know that it's there, the item, but it is not yet live. So, I mean, then you can open a new query and you can just execute the query that you want to do. And that's it, this will run. The thing is, for example, one of your questions can be about how can I monitor this? Because if I can't use Query Store, if I can't see this one from the portal, what can I use? Normally, I use queries. For example, I have here the DM exec request and the SQL text in order to say, hey, what is running? Or another thing that you can do is just to implement SP who is active on the primary. I don't have it, but at least you can use queries in order to monitor this secondary replica. I am using, as I mentioned, DM exec request and the text in order to get the text. And then if I want to see the overall of the resources being used in Azure SQL MI, I use DMDB resource stats in order to get this information right now about the CPU, about the IOPS and memory and all that stuff. But this one's in case that you want to use the secondary as your read instance, let's say, or if you want to offload the reads. This one is by default. I didn't enable anything. So every time that you build an Azure SQL MI or you migrate from general purpose to business critical, this will be automatic. Okay. So my query finished, everything is fine, 3 million records. I was able to see the information. So let me see, let me run this again. Okay, this one is what is running right now. So at least I know which is the query that is consuming more CPU right now. And then if I want to see the overall, I use the other one. What can we do in case that something happened? Well, you can stop querying the secondary. If you see that there is a delay on the information being sent on the internal availability group, well, you can start killing sessions. So everything synchronized again. But okay, now let's start talking about Fabric. Well, this one is Fabric. As I mentioned, how can you connect? Fabric.microsoft.com. You will see this icon there, which is the Fabric one. This one is the main part of Fabric. As I mentioned, you have different experiences, as you can see here, Power BI, Factory Activator, among other things. Let's say that I want to engineer. You have something called workspaces. The same thing that you have in Power BI, it's exactly the same thing. How do you know that it's a Fabric workspace? Well, you can see here the diamond, which is marking that this workspace is a Fabric one. You can create different workspaces. You can assign access to different workspaces. It depends. In my case, I am using one for Kansas City. Then here you have something powered by Airflow, in where you can create your own tasks, or there are some, for example, task flows that for example, you want to build a medallion architecture. This one, while by default, will create all of different resources in order to accomplish a medallion architecture. This one will be automatic. Obviously, then you need to, code everything and all that stuff. But by default, you have different task flows in case that you want to build something very quick. In my case, I create something called get data, which is this one, as you can see. Here I have a pipeline because I click new item and then I choose data pipeline. This one is my pipeline, very simple, just to be honest. In the meantime, let me show you that I am exporting data. Well, in this case, I am pulling because I am in Fabric and I am pulling information from Azure SQL MI. I mean, you can just use the copy assistant in where you choose your data source. In our case, I choose Azure SQL MI. Here I will have the first thing to mention because it's very important. As I mentioned before that Azure SQL MI is being built within a VNet. There is a small thing today in Fabric. If you are using, for example, pipelines, the small thing as of now is that you can just use the public endpoint today. I escalated this to the PC team. We are talking right now, but as of now, using Azure SQL MI within private endpoints with Fabric is not supported. So if you want to pull data using pipelines, you will have to enable the public endpoint. So it's honestly, it's very simple in order to enable the public endpoint. Oh, sorry, I thought that somebody wants to do some questions. So in order to enable the public endpoint, sorry, let me minimize this. You need to here click enable, but then very important thing is to add a rule to allow the port 3342. This one is the endpoint that we will have to use. So let me just copy this one. And very quick, I will show you how to create the rule. You need to click here, which is the VNet. Then you will see here that you will have to click subnets. And then you will see here, manage instance, the last one. And then you will see here, security group. You click here and you will see the different rules, the inbound and the outbound. So here I created one for inbound and one for outbound. So here, as you can see, is the inbound. And here I created the outbound. So basically we will be able to get data using this port. I mean, every time that you enable the public endpoint, it will use a different port from the SQL itself. So now you will use 3342 in order to get data. So in my case, I'm going to use, remember, here public and here the port. And here Adventure Works DW 2022. So here you can use different options. You can use SQL authentication as long as you enable SQL authentication with Azure SQL MI. You have a service principal, which is between quote a service account within Azure, or you can use your own account. I think that. So I click sign in. I use my account. Already exists. Yes, I know. Okay, never mind. Let me do this one. Let's use DW. No, because I'm not seeing the other one. Let's see. Okay, if I use basic, Gonzalo, Okay, so I change the name and that's it. And then I choose, in case that I want to query the table or view, or I want to create my own query in order to get the data, I can use the query, or I can just move an entire table from Azure SQL MI to Fabric. In Fabric, I am going to use something called Lakehouse, which is a new storage layer in where you can leave information. I don't know, team customer, let's say. This is just an example. And that's it. I will be pulling data from Azure SQL MI into Fabric using pipelines. It's very simple. It's a couple of clicks and that's it. As I mentioned, because I am using the public endpoint. So here you will see the preview of the data. Click next. Second. I don't know, let's use Lakehouse. Name test, who knows. I will create the Lakehouse and I will move the data. Look to new table. You will see in a few the column mappings. You can enable partitions in case that you have multiple, let's say, years or months or IDs, depending on what you're using now. You can create different partitions. Come on. And then that's it. The process will start and you will move the data from one side to another one. Click next, and you will see that you are going to move Azure SQL MI to Lakehouse, save and run, and boom, this starts. And that's it. This is the first way to move data or pulling data from Fabric or from Azure SQL MI into Fabric. Now, let's say that you have your security team and for some reason you can't use a public endpoint because it is mandatory for your company to use private endpoints and you need to use private endpoints and not the public endpoint. What can you do? Well, as I mentioned, pipelines is not yet supported for using private endpoints. So what you can do? Well, the only way that you have today to move data from Azure SQL MI to Fabric using private endpoints is using notebooks. Here, I created a notebook. In order first, let's go and enable within Fabric, let's enable the private endpoint. Basically, you will have to follow some steps. It's very easy, honestly. Here, you will have to go to your workspace, then click workspace settings and click network security. Here, you will have to create a new private endpoint. You can use a name, I don't know, Azure SQL MI Kansas test, let's say. Then you will have to get the resource identifier. How can you do that? Well, you can use, for example, the bash here within Azure or the Cloud Shell. In my case, I am using PowerShell, but you can use other ones as well in case that you want to use it. Let me execute the command because I prepared this before, but let me just clear this. And let's execute. I am listing my Azure SQL MIs, at least the one that I have within the subscription. You can filter this in case that you have multiple Azure SQL MIs, but the value or the information that you will need is this one, ID here. You will have to get this ID in order to configure the private endpoint. Let me get the other one because I assume that this little guy is going to tell me that, hey, you already exist. So let me use the other one. I will copy. And then you put here the resource identifier and automatically it will say Azure SQL Managed Instance here. That's it. You click create, and the request will start. You will see that it's provisioning. Then an approval will be required in order to enable this connection, this private connection between codes. Let me see if I am able to see this. Let me minimize this. Let's go home, SQL, Kansas City 2. And you will see on the private endpoint connections, as you can see, here we have the private endpoint. So I click here, I click approve, approved by Gonzalo. Yes. Once this is approved, the connection or the private endpoint is being configured. And that's it. You will see afterwards succeed, approve, as you are seeing the primary. So then what we can do? Well, as you can see here, let me show you. As of now, it's supported for notebooks and Spark jobs. And I mean, the Spark jobs behind bars will use notebooks, obviously. So then the only way to use private endpoints in Azure SQL MI is using notebooks. I have an example here. I don't know if this will, because it will take some time to, let me see, new standard session. Well, I will start. Basically, I am using PySpark, but you have different languages depending on what you want or what you need or when you want to use or what you prefer. It's up to you. In my case, I am importing the PySpark SQL library, and then I am just doing a normal SQL query using the port 1433. As you can see here, I am not using the public endpoint here, the database, the user, the password, the driver. And then I am just querying the DBO.factfinance table. And that's it. I don't know if it's starting. It will take some time. But I already did that. And as you can see, I created a data frame with this information, with this table, and then I just show the data frame, and that's it. And you will see this. So if you want to use private endpoints because your company or your customer is saying, hey, I want to use private endpoints and not the public endpoint, well, you can use notebooks. So let's go to the other one while this one starts. So now let's say that we don't want to pull, we want to push some data from Azure SQL MI to Fabric to storage accounts, and then do whatever you want. Because when the data is exported, then you can copy, you can do whatever you want using a file system between quotes. So now, first of all, I mean, we're going to use something called Polybase. Polybase is a service that you can also use within SQL servers if you're using a VM in on-premises or in other cloud provider or in Azure. You can use Polybase to export data. So again, I am going to use the bash because I need to use PowerShell in order to enable this. So basically, let me just copy this little guy. In my case, I just use my subscription ID. I mean, you can get the subscription ID everywhere. Let's say that this is your Azure SQL MI. You have your subscription ID here. This is the value. I put this step because maybe you have multiple subscriptions, not a single one, and you want to make the change where you want. That is why I put subscription ID there. And then let me use Kansas City 2 because I didn't enable this there. You need to use this command, which enables Polybase. Basically, oops, wrong side here. We are modifying an Azure SQL MI, which is Kansas City 2. And this is the feature, allow Polybase export value once, meaning that we are enabling this. You click start and that's it. This will modify Azure SQL MI. This doesn't require any reboot or restart or downtime. And then you can check if this is enabled or not. I will show you this one on the actual primary because the other one is still running. So let me remove the parameters. So we go to the primary, click new query, come on. New query, new query. Let me see in the meantime if this finishes. Yes. So now this one is the output or the result, which is succeed, and now the option is 1. You can check obviously this one, but I wanted to show you how you can do this within the engine. New query, yes. But wait, I am using, I don't know if I'm using the correct one. So let's click new query. So then you can check for the sys configuration, and then you will see if this one is enabled or not. So now what we are going to do is just to export data from SQL Server into Fabric directly using Polybase. So obviously the first thing is access. So how can we provide access to Azure SQL MI? Basically, what we are going to do to authenticate to Fabric is using service principals. Here you can, oh no, Kansas City one. Here you click identity and you will see that you have the manage identity and the service principal. In my case, I have both enabled, but you can use manage identity or service principal in order to authenticate into Fabric. And then you will have to assign access to these users within Microsoft Fabric. Well, it's still starting, no worries. In the meantime, what you can do is just to assign the access to the workspace. For example, you can click add people and you can search by your Azure SQL MI name, and automatically you will see both entities appear in there, so you can assign access. You can assign viewer, admin, contributor, it depends the level of access. But after that, you have access from the Azure SQL MI into Fabric. So what next? Well, basically, we will have to execute a SQL script. Oops. Here. So first of all, let's move to the database. Everything is created, but I will just execute the statement, even though they will say, hey, yes, this is already here, just to make sure that everything is there. So first, we will create a file format, which is basically a Parquet file. Today, Fabric supports CSV or Parquet. So as long as you have those file formats, you are fine. Let's create. So yes, you're already there. Yes, I know. And then a database scope credential. So this process uses the managed identities for Azure SQL MI in order to authenticate into Fabric. Then an external data source. This one is very important because there is one thing that you need to change. Kudos to Shovan Popovich from Microsoft because he did an amazing blog post that helped me a lot, just to be honest. So now let's go to my lakehouse. In my case, is this one, Kansas City Lakehouse. Then you can click the files here and you can click properties and you will get this value here, ABFS path, this one. This one is the location of your lakehouse. So let's copy it. Sorry. But there are some things that you need to change. If you paste this as this, or at least the one that you got from the Fabric, you will have to change the very beginning value because ABFSS is not supported, but also you will have to change this one, DFS, and you will have to use blob because data lake is not yet supported. So be careful with that because if you execute this, it will fail. So make sure that you modify these two things. Okay. So then you will create the external data source, which is the target, which is the location in where the information will be written. And then you can create the external table. I mean, what happens if I update the source table if I create an external table? nothing. This is not a change data capture. You will not get the data updates. You will not get the modifications. So this is like a snapshot of your data. So then I will create, obviously it's 1000 rows, it's nothing. But on the Kansas City folder, I create the fact finance folder with the Parquet. So I exported data. So I push information from Azure SQL MI to the lakehouse in Fabric. So now let me refresh here. And you will see Kansas City. And here, the fact finance. And here, the Parquet file. So now what I can do is just click load to tables, new table, fact finance, and here we use Parquet, and that's it. I create a delta table with this Parquet information. This one, if in case that you want to push from Azure SQL MI to Fabric, but I have 9 minutes, so I will be fast so I can show you how to export to blob storage instead. Well, this one will finish, we will see a table here, and that's it. So now let's see what will happen in case that I want to move data not to a lakehouse, but now to a storage account. A master key is required in order to move forward with this. I move to the database. I create a master key within the database. Then I create the same thing, the same external file format, again, Parquet, and the same data compression for Parquet. I create a database scope credential. Why? Because I am connecting to a blob storage, but now using a shared access signature. I am not using Azure SQL MI managed identity right now. I am using a SAS instead of a managed identity. If I have time, I will show you how to get this. And then I create the external data source. In my case right now, it's a blob storage. It's not Fabric. Again, if I am talking about a medallion architecture, this will be my bronze layer because I am leaving everything on the first layer, which is the bronze one. And I am using the credential that I created before, using the shared access signature. If I click this, obviously I already create this, and then I will create the external table. And as you can see, again, we push data from Azure SQL MI into blob storage right now. So let's check the information. In my case right now, I am using the storage account. I use Azure SQL MI Fabric. In case that you are not familiar with this, here you have shared access signature. You can assign service and container permissions, and you click end, let's say 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, whatever. You click generate SAS and connection string, and here you have what you need, SAS token. And you copy this value and you paste it when you are creating the credential, and you get permissions, at least the permissions that you need. Since I already created everything, I will see the container, the bronze layer. You will see, I think that I use, let me see, Data Kansas as the locations, Data Kansas, yeah. And you will see here the Parquet file. So here you have two ways. You can use Fabric, or you can use, for example, Databricks. But let's see the Fabric example. I mentioned before when we were talking about different architecture, or at least seeing the architecture diagram, that we can use something called shortcut. So let's see. I can click here on the files. I can create new shortcut, as you can see here. Here you have different sources in case that you have, let's say that you have, for example, a Fabric or different lake houses within Fabric and you want to share information. Or in my case, I am using Azure Data Lake. Then we are going to use the URL. In my case, is this one. Obviously, I already created the connection because I was doing this before, but then you can use a key instead for connecting to the Azure Data Lake, Data Kansas, and you will see the Parquet file. Next. Great. We are creating the shortcut, but I wanted to show you the difference. In case that you will use Fabric in the future, you will see that if you're using a shortcut, you will see the shortcut logo there instead of having the folder. So at least you know that you are using the shortcut here. And then you can do the same. Load to table and create your Delta table, and that's it. Data Kansas too. And here, Parquet. Load. And then I created a Delta table, and then you query. You can use warehouse experience in order to create those queries or querying information. I can click just here, and you will see the data. So we exported, we pushed data from Azure SQL MI right now into a blob storage, and now you can see the data. You can create your own reports. You can use notebooks. You can use whatever you want to transform, extract, load, whatever you need data. But let's say that you are using Databricks and you want to configure the same thing that we did before, but using Databricks. So basically, again, I am using Python, but you can use these different languages in case that you want to use other language. In my case, I am using Python. I have my storage account, the storage account key as we did before, the container, which is bronze layer, and I have here the URL being built automatically with the other variables. Then I display all the files that are in the container, and then I read data, all of the Parquet files. Let's say that we have multiple Parquet files because it's a big table, or I have different versions of the same table and I want to merge all of them. And that's it. Let me see if I run the cell again. I don't know if this will take time because it's interrupted. Be nice with us. Yes, nice. Okay, so I listed all the files that are there. In my case, I have Data Kansas and Kansas City because I have both containers. And here we have the information. I have 3 minutes. Nice. And here you have the information. 2 minutes for questions. I am all ears.
Thank you. That's a really great presentation. You have so much great detail in there from the very beginning when you were talking about the managed instance. I found that part about the failover between 22 on-prem and then in the cloud, just like, wow, that can be a game changer, I think, for a lot of people who want to try cloud, but maybe it doesn't work out for whatever reason. So all the way to the end where you were diving into that lake house, just some really great information. And I know I'll be going back and reviewing this video over and over for a lot of that different things, because it's lots of stuff there. I didn't see any questions come across the line, so I think we are good there. I know that, and I do appreciate also that credential part you were talking about, because that's tripped me up in the past. Just like, why can't I access it? And the detail out there on Microsoft is not always clear. I really appreciate.
Where I have question. Where could we see the previous, like today's we want to go over again to see, and where could we possible to see these where can I find it?
So we will put that on the Kansas City YouTube space here in the next few days. And let me grab that link for you and I'll put it in the chat box.
So you'll send a link, right?
Yeah, I'll put it in the original meeting and then also in our group thing. Just a second.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I should have had this up. I try not to have YouTube up when I'm having when somebody's presenting, because things can go off with sound all of a sudden. Pull it up, view channel. Here we go. Next.
I just want to say thanks for this information. My brain's a little overloaded. I haven't used Fabric yet, so there was a lot in there that was looking new to me. But I can see I had questions while I was going through it, but you were answering them too, so that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much. I think that we're good with questions. So again, really, really appreciate for you speaking for us today, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christina. It was nice to meet you. Thank you, guys. The ones who joined. Let's stay in touch. Bye-bye.